Okay, so I just want to say one thing about today. So I mean, we all saw that on Thursday. We had a really good discussion about all the like national policy, and that's definitely a fun part of the club. But the reason why we want to talk about harm reduction is because we think that like establishing these fundamental values is where like you can start off and then grow from there. So just to put the lessons today into context. So that being said, for some of the stuff we've learned about harm reduction, it's actually the case that for the most part, Northwestern Health Services, they do, for practical purposes, they do have a bit of harm reduction implemented into like the school's policy. So one of the biggest, the most relatable example for sure is definitely alcohol. So I just want to start with one question. How many of you on a scale of 1 to 5 would say that it's easy to call for help if a friend overdoses on alcohol?
I think it's really hard. There we go.
Yeah. Really hard.
Okay, why do you think it's really hard?
Well, personally, like I've never like called for someone or I've seen people like in really bad states. Not because I'm like worried about like what's gonna happen to me or something like that, but because it's so hard to tell like if someone, even I consider myself to be informed about that, but it's just like I don't know. Or if people like are like showing resistance to it. Like on New Year's, I was some kid who was like, oh no, but like his friends were like, I swear he's fine. I'm with him all night. I'm like, dude, like he like can't function right now. So it's like you don't know what to do, especially if there are other people who like say they know them better.
Anyone want to add anything?
Yeah, especially like being in school, like, you know, you have to pay the ambulance fee, you have to pay hospital fees, and then like you have to get in trouble with the CAs.
Yes.
It's hard to tell when it's like really necessary to call for help, because you know, if you call for help, you're crossing this line where you're just like bringing a shit ton of extra trouble to both yourself and the person. So it's really just kind of hard to, you know, kind of figure out, is it really worth it?
Yeah, and then there could also be an added social stigma where like you're gonna be the party pooper.
You were that asshole.
You're basically it's a party by calling the ambulance. Yeah.
I mean, there's like no system in place to like have someone just check in on someone. Like if you call for assistance, then you're guaranteed to have some sort of negative consequence. I feel like you're guaranteed to have, you know, people are gonna school that might get you in trouble for it. You might have to pay an ambulance fee, things like that. Whereas you're not sure if the help is even necessary.
Yeah. So I mean, there are definite like costs and risks, I guess, that you need to weigh in this.
What do the consequences look like at Northwestern? Does anyone know what RAP is?
Responsible action protocol.
So like if you stay with someone, you're like you can't get in like that much trouble basically.
Right, so there are 3 parts to the responsible action protocol, and they're call, stay, and cooperate. So if a friend of yours, anyone is in trouble, overdosing on alcohol, whatever sort of situation it is like that, and you feel they need help, you call for help, first of all. You stay with that person, put them in the recovery position, make sure nothing else is going wrong, and once medical help gets there, whether it's an ambulance or police or something else, you cooperate, you know, with them.
Just to answer that previous question of when to call, it's very, very tough to assess this. But I mean, I can tell you what Red Watch Band training told me. I mean, again, this is situational, but a good working like criteria for calling is mostly if a person is unresponsive. That can be like usually to some form of pains, like pulling on their ears, rubbing their chest, something that would be uncomfortable. And like if you do this like a few times and they're not responding, that's probably a time to call the ambulance.
That's a good little specific thing to know. Credit to who did the naloxone. Maya, at the Midwest Regional Conference, just make a fist and rub it against the person's chest. That's pretty painful if you put some pressure into it.
Yeah.
So
It's hard to do. Yeah, it's hard to do.
or their upper lip. Maybe even more uncomfortable. Don't punch anyone with this. That is not harm reduction.
Okay, so anyway, the responsible action protocol is in place to encourage students to call when when the interest is when safety is the interest at hand. So the responsible action protocol is in place to mitigate most of the consequences, primarily for the caller who makes the call. Northwestern does weigh like the severity of the situation, like if there are any injuries, if there are multiple people at this party that are like having to be called, if there are other drugs that are mixed in here. Like Northwestern tries to weigh like all of the circumstances of the situation involved. In general, if you make the call, if you stay with the person the whole time, and if you cooperate with the authorities, then you as the caller will be, for the most part, well off. But again, there are no promises.
And that still doesn't really protect you from the police either, because I've had friends that have called and then the cops showed up and like cited them for alcohol in the room.
Yeah.
Isn't it you're protected from being in trouble for being intoxicated, but you're not protected from providing alcohol for someone?
Yeah, that's very true. If you're providing alcohol to a minor, that is like an infringement that can be made against you. Separate from calling, though.
Speaking of providing alcohol, who knows what the social host law is?
Oh,
I do.
Kevin, would you like to tell
Kevin's
us?
sitting right here in the front of the class, best student in the room.
Yeah. So
Snap
social
for
host
Kevin.
law. So I know this because our house used to be a lodge house, and the police came to our door the first day we moved in and assumed that we were also. And they were like, "We don't want any trouble from you guys this year. Here's the new social law." And we read through it, and basically it says anything that happens to anyone detrimental after being at your party is pretty much your fault. If someone breaks an arm because they were drunk after going to your party, then it's on you. If someone, I don't know, goes to a different party and alcohol overdoses, it still can link back to you. I think it's even if they didn't drink your alcohol. I think it's even if they were just there. So that's fun.
Yeah, good summary.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid, I don't want to say avoid getting in trouble, because you're not trying to do anything wrong hosting a party, but how do we make a party safer and avoid some of the problems that might be associated with the social host law or parties in general?
Just like have water.
Definitely.
It's like very basic, but never happens.
Yeah, make sure everyone has a safe way to get back home.
Safe.
Take keys. Take keys. I mean, not a huge thing on this campus, but
There are general issues with stuff like jungle use where people don't know how much alcohol is in it, so they run a greater risk of drinking more than they intended.
Or have like a bartender. Having a bartender. Yeah. Also, other things you can do is like give neighbors a heads up. Like that might help with police, if that's the case.
have somebody at the door who's like who's like checking out people who are coming in case like somebody comes in and they're already hammered and then they like overdose at your party and then you get screwed for it.
You should never let someone who's already really intoxicated.
Also, in terms of opening the door, if you need to talk to the police for any reason, open the door, step outside, and close the door. That way, if anything is going on inside, that officer would not take kindly to. It's not visible.
Which we know would never happen.
Of course.
Wait, so like when can the cops actually come in to break up a party?
Only if they can come to your door to talk about a noise complaint. If they want to actually come in and like search, that they have to have probable cause. so that would either come from a search warrant if they were just coming in, or if you open the door too widely and they smell like marijuana coming out, that's probable cause.
See alcohol.
Yeah, see alcohol in plain sight. A lot of it's like plain sight things that they can sense. Yeah.
Or if you have beer cans on your porch.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're like, if you were personally of age and you have like, beer cans on the porch or something, can they still like take a look or?
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah.
Especially if you're polite and respectful to the police officers. They're
Right.
much less
Yeah.
likely to give you a hard time.
Yeah, always be polite with police officers. Just like if you get confrontational, they're gonna get confrontational with you, and that's always bad for you.
I was just curious, like, I was at a party at home once, and I think there was like a gate to the backyard also. And the cops like came around and like with like flashlights, like yelling at everyone that they were like all like breaking the law and stuff. Why does it like, is that legal?
So essentially, like, if there's like an open gate, and how do you know if the gate's open or not, right? Once the cop's standing next to you with a flashlight, but if there's an open gate, a cop could walk through. Just like with, so that's like Scott's whole point is, if you leave your door open, that allows a police officer to step in to talk to you more easily. Like, their job is to collect information, so they're going to take as much space as they can in the name of collecting information and trying to figure out what you might be doing wrong. So closing the door kind of shuts off that way of them gathering more information, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, and this isn't necessarily advice to like to help you hide your drugs. It's just that in these situations, you actually do have rights that it's probably in your best interest not to have the police trample on, which they do routinely do when like you give up your rights.
Right, we're going to get to a point where we talk more extensively about knowing your rights when dealing with law enforcement, but this also definitely relates to harm reduction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Moving on from alcohol, what does marijuana policy look like at Northwestern? Does anyone know what happens if you get caught with weed?
Housing probation, I believe, social probation.
Academic.
I was gonna say, don't they have to call? I know in like the dorms at least, like they can't go through the university, they go straight to like the police.
Yeah, I think it is housing probation actually.
Yeah, there are,
Academic.
academic or housing probation.
Yeah. Also, potential problems include losses of financial aid, inability to study abroad. That sucks.
You can't study while you're on academic probation.
Yeah.
You can't study abroad.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but usually, or like I got caught smoking weed on campus by UDP, and it was like only for a quarter, so I still managed to study abroad.
Ashley?
Isn't, I'm not like sure it's the full policy, isn't that like discriminatory if you lose financial aid? Because like for some students that means they like can't go to college anymore, for some students it doesn't mean anything.
That,
I'm like, no.
that is a legitimate gripe with,
Potential
Yeah.
lawsuit right there.
yeah, but that is the case. You might have to call your parents also,
Yeah.
another concern potentially.
Yeah.
But, I mean, so marijuana is decriminalized in Evanston,
Yes.
up to 10
Up to 10
grams.
grams. Marco is fighting for more, incidentally. That's in progress right now. But yeah, what tends to be the case is that you still have to go to court. First-time offense is dismissed. But anyway, what I've seen from my experience is that generally you have to do some form of community service. I think it was 8 hours.
Yeah, they like, you go to the Evanston like court up, and they, for like everyone, they were just running down the line, there were like, there's 20 other people there, and it's $500 or 8 hours of community service.
Yeah.
They just ask you.
Yeah. So there are those legal there are those legal structures in place to like lessen the severity, but as a Northwestern student, there are definite measures taken by the university. One big one that we want to inform you about, though, is the brief alcohol. What's that?
Brief alcohol statistics and intervention counseling.
Basics. Yeah, but Basics is a program. It kind of has a bad rep right now, but it's actually not terrible. It's you talk with a counselor for an hour or two to just assess your drug use. It's supposed to be non-judgmental. It's actually not as bad of a thing that people might make it out to be when there's like disciplinary action
Yeah.
involved.
Has anyone been to basics that would be willing to share what the experience was like?
I just finished it last week. It's actually pretty cool. Or it depends apparently on the counselor you get, but yeah, mine, she was really like relaxed about talking about my alcohol and marijuana use. They really don't judge you. They know that people do these things. They basically just like show you the statistics on campus. Or the first time you go around, you talk to them about your use, and then you take this survey. And then the next week, you go over your survey results, and it's basically like putting you in statistics as compared to the rest of campus, which they know are pretty skewed because some people aren't very open about it. But yeah, it's not that bad. It's fairly simple, pretty easy, and
Is there an expectation of certain changes you make with your substance use?
it depends, because for me, like I don't have like a big issue with it, but she says with people who do, like when she does spot dependency on there, I think she said she either does kind of recommend that they go into like more like meetings with them, or that they start showing them like ways to like cut down, or like when what they should do as compared to like the rest of like the campus. And they get them more advice, I guess, but I don't know that.
So it's geared towards abstinence still in some ways, but it's also taking into account your.
They're actually more towards the harm reduction, because they didn't tell me to stop. They were just like, just make sure like you don't cross like a certain line.
That's what I hear about it.
Yeah, when I went through, they had me brainstorm like ways I could reduce my drug use or like change my drug use if I wanted to.
So that's pretty classic harm reduction, I think, right?
Yeah.
That's like what I was saying before about what I think of as being the most fundamental aspect of harm reduction is that you're basing your plan for success and recovery on what the individual thinks, not on what you project onto them.
Well, like even when they have an opinion they want to share, like they're really kind of like soft about it. And they're like, like I have something I want to share. Is that okay with you?
This is harm reduction counseling that they're doing. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Northwestern practices harm reduction.
Yeah, and we think in practical use, it's among the best ways. There's actually statistics that show it's pretty effective. So, speaking of statistics,
We want to do this.
yeah, we do. We want to.
Or are we just doing it over there?
We do have some more room.
Yeah, but speaking of statistics, we want to survey what you think drug and alcohol use is on campus. So perceptions of use and actual use. And we'll get into how this can tie into harm reduction in a little bit. But so in the past 30 days, what percentage of students do you think use alcohol?
70? Any other thoughts?
In how long?
In the past 30 days. Yeah.
Past 30 days.
All of these statistics are in the past 30 days.
And
At Northwestern. By students.
So 70 is actually quite close. It's 74%. How many do you think use marijuana?
What was it from?
74.
74.
In the past 30 days.
30?
Yeah, 30%.
30, anyone else?
20.
20?
It's 20%.
I've seen this shit.
Tisk.
I'll just keep quiet.
Okay, how about cigarettes? 5.
5, 7, anyone else?
11.
30.
Okay.
Old members are forbidden from
Yeah.
especially those with good memories.
How about hallucinogens?
5.
It's 3. And amphetamines, MDMA, cocaine, opiates are all about 1 to 2%. Okay, so
What do you guys think of these numbers?
yeah.
Is this what you would expect?
I expected more weed use, but I didn't know that's like because of
We don't have the actual perception data, but there are actually there are actually general surveys that are conducted about these statistics, and I think I remember Northwestern as a whole thought that like about 50 or 60% of the campus was using marijuana. So there is a vast disparity there. I think that's important to keep in mind. So.
Yeah, I'm always really surprised that there's twice the number of weed users.
Oh, yeah.
Users. That always surprises me.
So we're going to look at marijuana use a little more closely because, sorry.
This is kind of like based on the basics thing. Do you think this is kind of skewed in terms of people who don't actually admit their use as well?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Right, this is all self-reported,
Yeah.
so people could totally be lying, exaggerating, underestimating. Also, it is, the people are reporting based on the past 30 days. So for example, if there are a lot of music festivals at a specific time in the past 30 days, people might report more hallucinogen use, MDMA use, or if it's final season, people might report more amphetamine use.
Yeah. And if it's recruitment season, then people might use less because drug testing, for example. So yeah, there's variability in these statistics, but
Also, I feel like a lot of people don't think of Adderall as amphetamine,
Yeah.
so they don't necessarily put it down as amphetamine use, but.
The 26, I mean, when you think about alcohol, 74% looks high, but saying 26% of people haven't had a beer in the past 30 days.
yeah,
Like
that's pretty eye-opening.
I can't really think of anyone who hasn't had a drink in a month.
Yeah,
You know?
but there are pockets of campus that.
Yeah, that's, I guess it doesn't not drink at all.
Okay, but since marijuana is probably the most widely acknowledged illicit drug that we use, we want to take a look at how often they're using in the past 30 days. So, what % of campus do you think is using, of marijuana users, is using 1 to 2 days out of a month? Once or twice? Answer. Don't answer. Any thoughts?
I'd say most.
Most?
Most,
Probably like
Most
60.
like 50, most
60.
like 80,
60.
60, anyone else?
40.
40?
40?
40's a little closer, it's
Yeah.
46%.
So, yeah, how about 3 to 5 days
In a month.
out of a month, yeah. So maybe like once a week. Yeah, 24%. 6 to 9 days, about twice a week.
12%.
12%.
It's
yeah.
12%.
So going down the list, we see 12% for another 12% for 10 to 19 days, 5% for 20 to 29 days, and 1% daily. Keep in mind, there's like 29 using 28 or 29 days out of a month is pretty close to daily. So like there's not an even like category between 20 to 29 and daily, but still, the vast majority of users are not using every day, and I think, given like what we've learned in the club, that should be pretty obvious. Not all drug use is like wildly out of control. So looking at different rates by gender, how does this number work?
What percentage of those who reported marijuana use, wait. Right, our statistics might be a little messed up. You're not going to be able to figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
What
Percentage
what
of
percent
people
of-
on campus.
What percent of males do you think use
Yeah,
marijuana?
what percent of males
that's
on
what it
campus do you
is.
think use marijuana?
Thanks, Kevin.
In the past 30 days?
In the past 30 days.
40.
Yeah. Well, remember that our statistic for all of campus is 20% for both genders, so, yeah.
So 30?
Yeah, it's 24%, and that makes females 18%, so.
Balances out.
Yeah, balances there. Around there. How about looking at Greek affiliation? This is for all Greeks, not just marijuana users. What percent of Greeks do you think use marijuana?
50.
Anyone else? Any lower guesses? It's about 26%. Yeah,
Yeah,
That's
past
the
30
same
days.
as all of campus, right?
6% or lower.
Wow.
Yeah, not significant.
How about non-Greek? For all of campus?
14%.
17%.
Because more complicated math.
That class.
But again, I mean, by showing these statistics, we want to show that at times there are definite disparities in perceptions of drug use versus actual drug use. And I think, like, there have been, I can cite various alcohol use campaigns on different campuses that were successful by bringing attention to this. So like, for example, I know that one alcohol campaign was that 3 out of 5 users only drink like below 4 drinks at parties, so like moderate use, and bringing attention to the fact that most users are moderate users is an important thing to know, and I think that ties into harm reduction.
So moving on, clearly people on campus use alcohol and drugs. You know, we know this. We just looked at some statistics that tell us about what percentage of campus is using what. So what happens when that becomes a problem for some people, when people move into problem use or are not okay with the way they're using drugs?
I think that the big issue is, say you smoke every day, right, and all the people you hang out with smoke every day, then you kind of just think like, oh, like, everyone smokes every day.
Yeah.
And then when you hear a stat that's, oh, 1%, it's like more of like it identifies your misperception. It's very easy to like, because you do drugs with the people who are going to do the same drugs as you. the same
Yeah.
foods.
Isn't that called the availability bias, I think,
Yeah.
in psychology? Yeah, it's a
Right.
perfect example.
So in general, as members of SSDP, we want to sort of avoid that sort of bias and to get a clear picture of what drug use at Northwestern looks like. So to that end, we want to be resources for the rest of campus
Yep.
as to what are safer ways to use drugs, what legal or other sort of problems a person can get into if they use drugs. So why are we that resource? Why might people want to come talk to us?
Because maybe they see us as a group that won't be judgmental. So it's like we're trying to provide this objective view on drugs because we're pushing for sensible policy on drugs. So they'll see us as a resource that won't be judgmental, won't like push for these misperceptions. So
Right. Anyone else?
I'm sorry, I need to go.
Okay.
But this has been very interesting.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Because like you said, we're not gonna tell them that they can't do these things. We're not gonna take away like this part of their life from them. We'll just like better educate them in terms of things they can change or if they want to.
Student led, so they feel comfortable talking about like their real life.
Right.
We're pretty knowledgeable, more so than, I mean, I kind of already know all this stuff, but before I joined the club, I didn't know, like, if someone was like, oh, how can I use marijuana safer? I wouldn't really know some of those things until now.
Yeah.
I don't know if most people would know, like, I don't know, large weeds.
I think it's also important to emphasize that like change can be hard, and we're not always going to be able to change people's behaviors right there and then. It might take a little longer time. So we might not be able to provide definite solutions right there. We can provide some advice, but other reasons why people might want to come to us are just to have someone listen. For example, they can dump and run. That means that they just want to vent their feelings. someone to listen but not advice, but they're getting it out there. So I mean, just being understanding and having that trusting relationship can be very beneficial in the long run. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that as members we're approachable and understanding, so we should consider things like our demeanor. So, I mean, there can be very basic things like just smiling, making positive body language, keeping eye contact. Will we understand them? We can point to like shared experiences, things we have in common. They definitely want to see that we are knowledgeable about these issues and can respond.
I was gonna say that a big thing is to not like try to fix their drug use until like they are asking for help. A lot of people just want, I mean, this ties into a lot of like people with mental health problem or things like that. A lot of times they just want to talk about it. They don't necessarily.
Sorry, I was trying to move this microphone so I can see you.
Most people just want to talk about it and have someone listen to them and smile, nod their head, and understand their problems. You don't want to fix them unless, or say like, oh, do you want some advice before you give it?
Does anyone else have any other ideas? How do we be approachable if someone does want to come to us?
Or I have a question, which is like, how do you be non-judgmental? Like, so for the people who were talking about basics before, the fact that counselor was being non-judgmental clearly came through because it's a common experience that multiple people have had. So what were they doing, or how were they communicating with you that made you feel like they were being non-judgmental?
I think one of the big things to think about is, again, like asking if somebody wants advice, asking if somebody wants help, not assuming that just because somebody is coming to you that they're looking for like your help or looking for like your experience. So I think one of the really like common things is to like interject like, oh, you're having this problem, like I had sort of a similar problem, so like I'm gonna use my experience to like compare to yours. I think that sometimes that's really counterproductive, and you have to like asking the person, do you want advice? Like telling the person, I have this experience that could help. Like, do you want me to talk about it? Like making sure that the person actually wants your advice before giving it to them, and like making sure that's really clearly stated is something that's really important.
I think the idea that I get from that is like overall just showing that you're focused on the person. And right, other people mentioned that idea of asking for permission. So like even if I'm going to give you advice, that I'm still centered on you, and do you want this advice, and how do you feel about your use, and what are you feeling? You know, like being centered on the person as opposed to shifting it to yourself is really important.
Absolutely.
I guess that's a question, like, I've had friends who say like, oh, like I'm quitting like cigarettes, or like I don't want to drink for like this many weeks or something like that, and they like tell you they're like excited about it, whatever, and then when they like, if they like use it or whatever, when they said they weren't going to, like, should you like not say anything, or say like, hey, what's up with that, or like, I don't know.
I think the key here is that that person's use is up to them, right? So they told you that they were going to quit cigarettes in your example because maybe they wanted someone to support them in that, or it could just be that they wanted to hear themselves, you know, say those words to kind of put it out there. So if you see that person doing what they said they weren't going to do, smoking cigarettes again, I think you don't want to come across as accusatory, right?
You don't want to shame them,
Right.
You don't want to make them feel bad about going against their word. I would say that's like a really, like that's probably the most important thing. And maybe when that person's first having that conversation with you is like, okay, well, do you want me to be a part of that? Like, I think one of the things that people always skip, like this comes later on also, but one of the things people always skip is figuring out how they're going to make changes. They don't make a plan, they just go straight to action and start making changes about their use. And so one of the conversations you can have, if somebody's past the point where they've already decided, I'm not going to use, this is my plan, to like help them figure out like how are you going to stick to that plan, and do you want me to be a part of that? I think that is really determined by the relationship you have with this person. So if it's the first time they're talking to you about it because they know you're a member of SSDP, that's different than if it's a really close friend of yours, you know?
I think it's also important to acknowledge that just the fact that somebody comes out and says, I want to reduce my alcohol use, or I want to reduce my cigarette use, or any sort of drug use, like, even if they don't do it, that step of coming out and saying that, like, this is a goal of theirs is a really positive step, and is, like, a really, really good first thing for them to do. So, like, again, like, working with them to achieve that is great, but, like, I think it's very counterproductive, as James was saying, to, like, shame them for not doing it, because, like, it is still a very positive first step that somebody comes and says that they want to reform their drug use in some sort of way and, like, make it better.
And I think when people go against, you know, what they plan on doing or what they say they plan on doing, that's a question to like, that's like a time to check in with them. Like, so what worked about what you tried, or what did you dislike about what you tried? It's like, if you want to like help them to try to commit to it, it's about understanding that process they're going through and trying to figure out what's right for them. Your love or, you know, your compassion for your friends, it shouldn't be based on your judgments about whether or not they're willing to do good or bad things to themselves, right? Like this goes back to the very beginning where we were talking about, do you have a right to hurt yourself? And it might not always be easy to see people making harmful choices with their alcohol and drug use, but I think the greatest thing that you can do as a friend is to be there for the people who are really struggling and to stay with them even when they are struggling. And even when they are, you know, refusing to change, or when they don't want to change, to like stay by their side through the tough times, I think is like the great test of your friendship with them.
I think we can move into just a bit of review for today. What are the things we've learned?
Yeah. And if you have any like unanswered questions at this point, please ask them.
Let's start with questions. Does anyone have any questions about what we've been talking about? Anything unclear? Sure.
Not doubt in your mind. Got this stuff.
Anything you guys want to talk about a little bit more when we still have some time?
Why is harm reduction such a controversial philosophy?
I think, you know, there's like a lot of common criticisms, and the whole, I think the discussion about harm reduction seems like one that will continue throughout the education process. But, you know, one of the main controversies of it is the idea that it enables people to use, that you're saying that it's okay for people to use. You know, harm reduction, as we push back against that, and we say we just accept people where they're at, whatever you choose to do about your use, we're going to work with you and try to help you where you're at. I think, from my experience, and this is like me speculating, but what I think really puts a lot of people off about harm reduction is that they only associate it with clean needles. And so they don't really think of harm reduction as being involved in anything other than injection drug use and safe needles, and that was like a thing that happened and we promoted it for a little while and then it went away. And I think harm reduction is a much broader philosophy than people give it credit for. And so I'm basing that bit, you know, from talking to people who are more involved in public health fields, I know that so I spoke to someone who's doing essentially a harm reduction program, like a drug education program for students, elementary and middle school students, around making harmful choices, your behaviors, all that sort of stuff. And everything that they're doing is harm reduction, you know, based on the definition we're using for harm reduction. But they don't call it that. And I remember talking to the researcher, and I was like, why is that? And it was pretty much, this is her reasoning, is people associate harm reduction with needles, you know, it has this bad reputation, but the truth is the work is, it is harm reduction even if they're not calling it that. So I think part of it is on us to identify harm reduction when it exists, and when people are using it effectively, to be comfortable in talking about it. But I think that's more so true in kind of the public health world. In general, I think a lot of people are just sort of ignorant of harm reduction. They don't really know that it's a paradigm for working with people. So that's kind of the advantage I think we have on this campus of being kind of, the first time someone hears about harm reduction who's at Northwestern, it's probably going to be one of you guys telling them about it, you know?
That being said, though, I think that everyone, to some extent, practices harm reduction in some aspect of their lives because a lot of it is common sense. But I mean, we want to take this a little further and contextualize it, put it into like a real paradigm of how we want to go about this work.